Before kingdoms emerged, before the pyramids were built, before history was recorded, there was a land where humanity took its first great leap. Between mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers, ordinary people achieved extraordinary things. They built the world's first cities, invented writing, created the earliest known laws, and laid the foundation of science, mathematics, and civilization itself. Here, empires would rise and fall, legendary kings would seek immortality, monumental temples would touch the sky, while wars, innovation, and human ambition shaped the course of history. Join us as we travel back over 10,000 years to discover how civilization began. This is not just the story of ancient civilization, this is the story of where civilization itself began. Welcome to the history of Mesopotamia, where humanity built the first civilization. As the first rays of sunlight illuminate at endless plains, two great rivers win their way across the landscape. These are Tigris and the Euphrates, flowing from the mountains of present day Turkey towards the Persian Gulf. Every year, their floodwaters spread across the land, depositing rich layers of fertile soil in a region otherwise surrounded by harsh deserts and rugged mountains. These rivers created a ribbon of life. Ancient people soon discovered that by digging canals and directing water into their fields, they could grow crops in abundance. The Greeks later called this land Mesopotamia, meaning the land between the rivers. Today, it includes much of the modern Iraq and parts of Syria, Turkey, and Iran. Unlike many other ancient civilizations that relied on the predictable rivers, Mesopotamia's floods could be both a blessing and a disaster. Entire villages could be destroyed overnight, forcing its people to innovate, cooperate, and adapt. This challenging environment shaped one of the humanity's greatest civilizations. Here, necessity inspired invention and survival led to extraordinary achievements. Civilization had found its home. Long before cities appeared, Mesopotamia was home to small groups of hunter gatherers who followed migrating animals and gathered wild plants. One of the most famous archaeological sites is Shanidar Cave in the northern Iraq. Here, scientists discovered the remains of Neanderthals who lived tens of thousands of years ago. Their carefully buried dead suggested that even these early humans practiced rituals and cared for one another. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, the climate became warmer and more stable. Forests expanded, wild grains flourished, the rivers flowed more consistently. Instead of constantly moving, some communities began settling near reliable sources of water. They experimented with planting seeds and storing food for the future. This gradual shift changed everything. Humanity was taking its first steps towards agriculture and eventually civilization itself. The foundations of history had quietly began to form. Around 10,000 years ago, a revolution unlike any before transformed human life forever. People who had survived by hunting and gathering discovered they could cultivate wheat and barley, domesticate sheep and goats, and produce more food than they immediately needed. Small villages soon appeared across the fertile crescent. Family built homes from mud bricks, stored grain in communal buildings, and worked together to irrigate their fields. Agriculture brought stability, but also a new challenge. Larger populations required organization. Water had to be shared fairly. Harvests need protection. Communities began selecting leaders to coordinate work and settle disputes. These simple farming villages became the seeds from which the world's first cities grew. The journey from scattered settlements to organized civilization had begun. In the centuries ahead, these humble communities would evolve into powerful city states like Eridu, Uruk, Ur, and Babylon, the places whose achievements would influence the humanity for thousands of years. The story of civilization was only beginning. The world had entered a new age. The Great Ice Age was over, and the climate across Near East was becoming warmer and more stable. Each year, the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers overflowed their banks, leaving behind rich layers of fertile silt. What appeared to be ordinary mud would become one of the greatest gifts nature had ever offered humanity. This fertile land stretching from the eastern Mediterranean to the valleys of Mesopotamia would later become known as the Fertile Crescent, a region destined to change the course of human history forever. Unlike many other parts of the ancient world, Mesopotamia possessed an extraordinary combination of natural resources. While wheat and barley grew across the plains, lentils and peas flourished in the fertile soil. The surrounding hills were home to wild sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs. For the first time, nature provided everything needed for a new way of life. Generation after generation, people carefully observed the cycles of seasons. They noticed that seeds dropped into moist earth sprouted into new plants. They learned that tending crops produced larger harvests than gathering wild food. Slowly, knowledge became experience, and experience became tradition. Agriculture was born not in a single moment, but through centuries of observation, experimentation, and patience. The transformation did not stop with plants. While sheep and goats were gradually domesticated, soon cattle, pigs followed. These animals become reliable sources of meat, milk, hides, wool, and unpredictable hunts. Communities now control many of the resources essential for survival. This revolution changed everything. For the first time in human history, food could be produced in greater quantities than were immediately needed. Grain was carefully stored for future seasons. Surplus harvests protected communities during years of drought and poor weather. Population began to grow, and villages expanded across the fertile plains. As settlements grew larger, new skills emerged. Some people became expert farmers, others crafted stone tools, pottery, baskets, and woven textiles. Trade slowly developed between neighboring communities, allowing ideas and innovating to spread across the region. Cooperation between one another became more important than ever before. As people worked together to cultivate fields, construct homes, and manage precious water supplies, the rivers that had once shaped the land were now being shaped by human hands. Simple canals and irrigation channels directed water into distant fields, making agriculture possible even beyond the natural floodplains. Humanity was beginning to master its environment, laying the foundation for increasingly complex societies. Across Mesopotamia, these farming communities gradually developed their own identities. In the north, some villages would eventually become associated with the Hasuna culture, recognized for their organized farming communities and early pottery traditions. Farther northwest, the Halaf culture would become renowned for its beautifully painted ceramics, artistic craftsmanship, and expanding villages. In central Mesopotamia, the Samara culture would pioneer more sophisticated irrigation system, allowing agriculture to flourish in areas that had once seemed too dry for permanent settlement. And in the south, the remarkable Ubaid culture would transform small farming villages into larger, well organized communities, introducing architectural innovations, long distance trade, and social organization that would influence Mesopotamia for thousands of years. These cultures did not appear overnight. They evolved gradually, each building upon the knowledge of those who came before them. Together, they laid the foundations of civilization unlike any the world had ever seen. The fields they cultivated would feed generations. The villages they built would become towns. Those towns would one day grow into a magnificent city. And from those cities would rise Sumer, Uruk, Ur, and the first true civilization in human history. The story of Mesopotamia was no longer just about survival. It had become the story of civilization itself. A farmer spread across Mesopotamia villages no longer looked the same. Each region developed its own culture, traditions, and innovations. These early societies became the building blocks of the world's first civilization. In northern Mesopotamia, the Hasuna culture emerged around 6000 BC. Its people built mud brick homes, cultivated wheat and barley, raised livestock, and created some of the region's earliest pottery for storing food. Farther northwest, the Halaf culture became known for its beautifully painted pottery. Their finely crafted ceramics were traded across distant settlements, proving that trade and culture exchange had already begun thousands of years before the first empires. In central Mesopotamia, the Samara culture mastered one of the civilization's greatest challenges. That's water. Yeah, it's water. By constructing simple irrigation canals, they brought the river water to dry fields, allowing agriculture to expand beyond the natural floodplains. Then in southern Mesopotamia, the Ubaid culture took these achievements even further. They built larger villages, improved irrigation systems, expanded long distance trade, and constructed impressive public buildings. They became the centers of community life. Their settlements were more organized than ever before, laying the foundation for complex society. Although these cultures lived in different regions, they shared one common goal to build a better future. Their ideas, innovations, and cooperation transformed small farming villages into thriving communities. They did not build the great empires, they built the foundations upon which empires would rise. Soon these humble settlements would evolve into the world's first cities, and among them the city would change history forever. Uruk. The age of civilization was about to begin. By around 4000 BC, southern Mesopotamia was changing faster than ever before. The farming villages established by the Ubaid culture continued to grow, and one settlement rose above all others. Its name was Uruk. Widely regarded as the world's first true city, Uruk became home to tens of thousands of people, an astonishing population for its time. Mud brick homes lined busy streets, while merchants, farmers, craftsmen, and priests worked together in a society more complex than anything humanity had ever seen before. At the heart of city stood magnificent temples dedicated to the sky god Anu and the goddess Inanna. These temples were not only places of worship but also the centers of administration, trade, and economic life. As Uruk expanded, managing such a large city became increasingly difficult. Keeping track of grain, livestock, taxes, and trade required more than memory alone. Around 3400 BC, the people of Uruk made one of the human's greatest inventions, that's writing. Using a reed stylus, scribes pressed symbols into the soft clay tablets, creating the earliest form of cuneiform script. What began as simple records of trade and harvest soon evolved into a revolutionary system of communication. For the first time, knowledge could now be preserved for future generations. Uruk was no longer just a city. It had become the birthplace of urban civilization, organized government, and written history. The age of villages had ended. The age of civilization had truly begun. As Uruk flourished, other powerful cities began to rise across southern Mesopotamia. Cities such as Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Kish, Nippur, and Eridu grow into independent city states, each with its own rulers, temples, army, and traditions. Although they shared the same language and culture, these cities competed fiercely for fertile land, water, and control of trade routes. At the center of every city stood a towering ziggurat, a massive stepper temple dedicated to the city's patron deity. These structures symbolized more religious devotion and political authority, reminding the people that their rulers governed with the support of gods. As population expanded, society became more organized. Farmers cultivated the fields, craftsmen produced pottery, and metal tools, merchants carried goods between cities and encouraged new ideas and technologies. But prosperity also brought rivalry. Competition for resources and influence often led to conflict. Alliances were formed, broken, and rebuilt as city states struggled for dominance. Among these powerful cities, legendary rulers would emerge, including Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, whose story would become one of the oldest surviving works of literature in human history. The foundations of civilization had been laid now. The struggle for power was about to begin. Shargon of Akkad, the world's first empire. For centuries, the greatest cities of Mesopotamia had competed for power. Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Kish, and many others fought for fertile land, trade routes, and influence. No single ruler could unite them for long. Then, around 2334 BC, history changed. A man named Sargon rose to the power in the city of Akkad. His origins remain shrouded in mystery. According to later legends, he was born into humble circumstances and set adrift as an infant in a basket along a river before rising to greatness. Whether legend or fact, one thing is certain: Sargon was a brilliant military leader. He built a disciplined army unlike any seen before and launched campaign after camping across Mesopotamia. One by one, the powerful Sumerian city states fell under his command. For the first time in history, dozens of independent cities were united under a single ruler. The Akkadian Empire was born, the world's first true empire. But Sargon's vision extended far beyond conquest. He established governors to rule distant provinces, strengthened trade networks, improved roads and communications, and encouraged the widespread use of the Akkadian language while preserving the rich traditions of Sumer. Goods such as timber, metals, precious stones, and textiles flowed across the empire, connecting lands from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. His grandson Naram Sin expanded the empire's future even farther. He declared himself the immense power of the Akkadian rulers. Yet no empire lasts forever. Years of rebellion, internal unrest, and changing climate weakened the Akkadian Empire. Eventually, invaders known as Gutians descended from the Zagros mountains, bringing an end to the empire's dominance. But although the empire collapsed, its legacy endured. Sargon had proved that many peoples, languages, and cities could be governed as one. His idea of empire would inspire rulers for thousands of years to come. Mesopotamia had entered a new era in which kingdoms would no longer dream of ruling a single city. They would dream of ruling the world. The renaissance of Ur, law and order, and a new golden age. The fall of Akkadian Empire left Mesopotamia divided. The once powerful empire fragmented into competing regions, while the Gutians from the Zagros mountains controlled most of the land. Trade declined, cities weakened, and political stability disappeared. But this period of uncertainty would not last forever. Around 2112 BC, a ruler named Ur-Nammu rose to power in the ancient city of Ur. Determining to restore order, he defeated rival force and founded the third dynasty of Ur, often called Ur III Empire. Under his leadership, Mesopotamia entered a golden new age. Ur-Nammu rebuilt cities, repaired canals, expanded irrigation, and strengthened agriculture. Grand temples and towering ziggurats once again dominated the skyline, reflecting both the wealth of kingdom and the importance of religion in everyday life. Yet his greatest achievement was not a monument of stone, it was a monument of law. Ur-Nammu introduced one of the earliest known written law codes in human history. These laws established rules of justice, property, and social order, showing that a civilization could be governed not only by power but also by written principles. His son Shilgi continued this remarkable legacy. He impressed administration, expanded trade, standardized weights and measures, and organized one of the most efficient governments of ancient world. Scribes carefully recorded taxes, harvests, and official records using cuneiform tablets, creating a highly organized state. But even this prosperous empire would not escape the forces of history. Around 2004 BC, repeated invasions by Elamites combined with the internal weakness brought the Ur-3 empire to an end. Yet its achievements would not be forgotten. Its laws, administrative systems, architectures, and traditions became the foundation upon which future Mesopotamian kingdoms would build. Soon, another city would rise to greatness, a city ruled by a king whose name would become synonyms with justice, Babylon. And at its center stood one of the history's most famous ruler, Hammurabi. As the power of Ur faded, a new city began to rise along the banks of Euphrates River. Its name was Babylon. At first, it was only a small kingdom among many rivals, but everything changed around 1792 BC, when a determined ruler named Hammurabi ascended the throne. More than a warrior, Hammurabi was a skilled strategist and administrator. Through diplomacy, alliances, and military campaigns, he united much of Mesopotamia under Babylonian rule, creating one of the most powerful kingdoms of the ancient world. Yet Hammurabi's greatest legacy was not his conquest, it was his commitment to justice. He introduced the Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest, most complete written law codes in history, carved into a massive stone stele. It contained nearly 300 laws covering trade, agriculture, family, life, property, wages, and crime. For the first time, laws were displayed publicly that people could know the rules by which they were governed. Although some punishments were severe by modern standards, the code represented an extraordinary step towards an organized legal system where justice followed written laws rather than a personal decisions of rulers alone. Under Babylonian rule, trade flourished once again. Merchants carried grains, textiles, metals, timber, and precious stones across long distance trade routes. Farmers expanded irrigation networks, craftsmen perfected their skills, and scribes continued recording knowledge on clay tablets. Babylon became not only a political center but also a thriving hub of culture, learning, and commerce. However, like every kingdom before it, Babylon's dominance would not last forever. After Hammurabi's death, the empire gradually weakened. Rival powers changed Babylon and new kingdoms emerged across Mesopotamia. But Hammurabi's last survived long after his empire had faded. His vision that a civilization should be governed by written laws would influence legal traditions for centuries to come. The story of Mesopotamia was entering another new chapter. Power would soon shift northward to a kingdom renowned for its discipline, military strength, and vast empire. Assyria was rising, the empire of warriors. As Babylon's power declined, a new force emerged in northern Mesopotamia. It was Assyria. Centered on an ancient city of Ashur, the Assyrians transformed a small kingdom into one of the most powerful empires the ancient world had ever seen. Their strength came from more than courage. The Assyrians built one of the history's most disciplined and organized armies, armed with iron weapons, powerful bows, siege engines, and horse drawn chariots. They became masters of warfare. Their military innovations allowed them to conquer vast territories with remarkable speed. By the ninth century BC, Assyria had begun expanding in every direction. Under kings such as Ashur-nasirpal II, Tiglath-Pileser III, Sargon II, Sennacherib, and Assurbanipal, the empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, ruling millions of people across the ancient Near East. To govern such a vast empire, the Assyrians built an efficient administration. Roads connected distant provinces, Governors managed the local affairs, and a network of messages carried information rapidly across the empire. This organization rapidly across the empire control over land separated by thousands of kilometers. The magnificent city of Nineveh became the empire's capital. Its grand palaces displayed intricate stone reliefs depicted royal ceremonies, hunting scenes, and military victories. But Nineveh was more than a symbol of power. King Assurbanipal founded one of the ancient world's greatest libraries, collecting thousands of clay tablets containing literature, science, medicine, mathematics, and history, including the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. Despite its achievements, the Assyrian Empire ruled through constant warfare. As revolts increased and enemies united against them, the empire became increasingly difficult to defend. In 612 BC, a coalition of Babylonians and Medes captured and destroyed Nineveh, bringing the mighty Assyrian Empire to an end. But Assyria's influence did not disappear. Its military organization, administration, engineering, and preservation of knowledge shaped the civilizations that followed. From the ashes of Nineveh, another great power was ready to rise. Babylon would reclaim its glory under a new dynasty, creating one final golden age before the arrival of Persian Empire. With the fall of Assyrian Empire in 612 BC, the balance of power shifted once again. From the ruins of war, Babylon rose to greatness for the second and final time. Under King Nabopolassar, the Babylonians, together with their allies, the Medes, ended centuries of Assyrian dominance and established Neo-Babylonian Empire. But it was his son, Nebuchadnezzar II, who transformed Babylonian into most magnificent city of its age. Massive defensive walls surrounded the city, while the famous Istar Gate, decorated with brilliant blue glazed bricks and images of lions and dragons, welcomed travels from across the ancient world. Babylon became a center of wealth, learning, architecture, and international trade. Merchants arrived from distant lands carrying timber, spices, metals, precious stones, textiles, and exotic goods. Scholars studied astronomy and mathematics, while priests carefully observed the movements of the stars, laying foundation for future scientific discoveries. According to ancient tradition, Nebuchadnezzar also built the legendary hanging gardens of Babylon for his queen, who longed for green mountains of her homeland. Although historians still debate whether the gardens truly existed, they became one of the greatest legends of the ancient world. For a brief moment, Babylon stood as the greatest city on earth, yet even the strongest kingdoms cannot escape the passage of time. In 539 BC, a new power arrived from the east, Cyrus, the great ruler of Achaemenid Persian Empire, entered Babylon with a little resistance. Rather than destroying the city, he respected its traditions, protected its temples, and allowed many displaced people, including the Jewish exiles, to return their homelands. Babylon became part of the vast Persian Empire, marking the end of Mesopotamia as the center of an independent empire. But its influence did not end. The achievements of Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians continued to shape the civilization that followed. Mesopotamia had given humanity cities, writing, laws, organized government, monumental architecture, and advances in science and mathematics. Its empires had fallen, but its legacy had become immortal. Though the kingdoms of Mesopotamia disappeared into history, the civilization they created became the foundation upon which much of the modern world was built. This story was ending, but their legacy would endure for thousands of years. Mesopotamia's age as the world's leading civilization had come to an end. After the Persian conquest, new empires rose and fell across the region. In 331 BC, Alexander the Great defeated the Persian Empire and marched into Mesopotamia. After his death, the region came under the rule of Seleucid Empire, bringing strong Greek influence to these cities. Centuries later, Mesopotamia became a battleground between the Parthian and Sasanian empires. Before parts of the region were absorbed into the Roman and later Byzantine empires. Then in the 7th century AD, another great transformation arrived. The Rashidun Caliphate conquered Mesopotamia and the region gradually became the part of the expanding Islamic world. New languages, cultures, and traditions flourished. While ancient cities slowly faded into history, yet Mesopotamia was never truly forgotten. Beneath the layers of sand and earth, the ruins of Uruk, Babylon, Nineveh, and Ashur silently preserve the story of humanity's earliest civilization. Thousands of years later, archaeologists uncovered temples, palaces, clay tables, statues, and city walls, revealing a forgotten world that had shaped human history. From Mesopotamia came the first cities, the first writing system, some of the earliest written laws, organized government, advanced irrigation, mathematics, astronomy, and literature. Even today, many ideas that define modern civilization can trace their origins to the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Mesopotamia was more than a place, it was the birthplace of civilization. Its kingdoms disappeared, its empires collapsed, but its discoveries changed the world forever. The voices written on ancient clay tablets still speak across 5,000 years, reminding us where our shared human story truly began. The civilization of Mesopotamia may have ended, but its legacy will endure for as long as human history is remembered. The story of Mesopotamia is not merely the story of an ancient land, it is the story of humanity's first great leap towards civilization. Between Tigris and Euphrates rivers, people transformed scattered villages into thriving cities, invented writing, built organized governments, created legal systems, expanded trade, and laid the foundation of science, mathematics, and literature. From Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians came ideas that shaped countless civilizations after them. The civilizations of Egypt, Persia, Greece, and Roman would each leave their mark on history, but many of the foundations they built upon had already been established in Mesopotamia. The clocks we follow, the laws that govern the societies, and written records that preserve history, and even the concept of cities all carry echoes of innovations. First developed thousands of years ago in this remarkable land. Today, the ruins of Uruk, Babylon, Nineveh, and Ashur stand as silent witness to the civilization that forever changed the course of human history. Though their empires have vanished, their achievements continue to shape the modern world. The Mesopotamia remind us that civilization was not created in a single day. It was built through the generations of curiosity, cooperation, innovation, and determination. Every great civilization that followed inherited part of its legacy. As we look back across nearly 6,000 years of history, one truth becomes clear. The story of Mesopotamia is, in many ways, the story of us. It is where humanity first learned to build not just villages or kingdoms, but the civilization itself. As our journey through ancient Mesopotamia comes to an end, one truth remains clear. The world's first cities may have fallen, its mighty empires may have vanished, but the legacy of Mesopotamia lives on. From writing the laws to cities, trade, mathematics, and astronomy, the foundations of our modern world were first laid between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. History is more than a record of the past, it is the story of human curiosity, innovation, and perseverance. And every great civilization that followed carried a piece of Mesopotamia's legacy into the future. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the cradle of civilization. If you enjoyed this documentary, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your fellow history enthusiasts. And remember, the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the world we build today. Until next time, keep exploring history.